As a settler in Canada, it is important to be aware of the current colonial mechanisms that impact Indigenous nations. They are legitimized by the Canadian state and are continued due to the ignorance of the general Canadian population. This leaves the Indigenous peoples of Canada in a state of disproportionate disenfranchisement. Food insecurity in Nunavut is a key exemplar of one of these neo-colonial conditions that affects Indigenous peoples and not the general populations of Canada. The United Nations Human Development Index for 2017 places Canada at number 12 out of 189 countries and territories, meaning that, for the general Canadian population, life in Canada is pretty great. However, using the same indicators that place Canada at number 12, Canada would place 63rd when examining the Indigenous populations, meaning that there's high disproportionate inequality in Canada. These inequalities are cleverly masked by showcasing Canada as a multicultural accepting nation in the international arena. But by unveiling the inequities domestically, it is clear that Canada still has a long way to go in order to fulfill its international profile. It is crucial to understand how the actions of the past continue to affect the present, and how colonialism was not only dominant in a time of discovery, but how these practices continue today. With this in mind, what is food insecurity, and what does it mean in the context of Nunavut? Food security has been defined by the United Nations as when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. Nunavut is in a crisis of food insecurity. Nunavut is home to the largest concentration of Inuit in Canada, as the territory's existence is due to the persistence and resilience of the Inuit in the Northwest Territories, who successfully fought for the largest land claims agreement in Canadian history. Food insecurity is a health issue, as it has detrimental consequences on health and well-being, and has been identified as a key variable in the social determinants of health. If we are to think of achieving food security like doing a puzzle, there are a variety of pieces that are currently missing due to colonialization. Inuit self-determination is the only way in which the pieces of the puzzle can be placed to finish with a complete picture of food sovereignty. Self-determination allows cultural resurgence to flourish, while simultaneously adhering to the ongoing process of reconciliation. Resurgence and reconciliation cannot occur when Canada attempts to do the puzzle, but rather when the Inuit complete it themselves. However, the process of creating food sovereignty through self-determination has been abruptly interrupted by various colonial apparatuses inflicted onto the Inuit by the Canadian federal government, starting with the colonial construction of poverty, both economically and culturally. Cultural poverty refers to the erosion of language and Inuit culture and traditions. Inuit are vulnerable to both kinds of impoverishment due to the colonial mechanisms enacted by the Canadian state to the Indigenous populations. By expanding what impoverishment entails, things that may fall outside of a Western understanding of poverty can become focal points for action, such as the resurgence of language, culture, and the harvesting of foods. Due to the existence of the Canadian state on stolen Indigenous lands, the Inuit have survived through some of the harshest social conditions, including forced relocation from traditional homelands and forced removal via genocidal assimilation tactics such as residential schools that kidnapped young Indigenous children and placed them into Catholic-run boarding schools that were rampant with sexual and physical abuse. The last residential school closed in 1996, meaning these policies are not in the distant past, but rather recent memory, and have caused death and intergenerational trauma. Along with these removal tactics was also the murder of sled dogs that was direct assault on Indigenous ways of life. These policies were and continue to be extremely hurtful to Indigenous mental, physical, and emotional health and have isolated the Inuit from their cultures, languages, learning mechanisms, and ways of life, all of which are essential to traditional food systems. As a result, the Canadian state has forced dependency on the Inuit, which has left them vulnerable. Inuit solutions are absolutely crucial to solving this colonial-made problem, which are already in existence and simply need to be adhered to. The Nunavut Food Security Coalition provides a model for Inuit food security that is built on the perspectives of Inuit and Nunavut. They have provided 6 themes that are crucial for improving food security: policy and legislation, country food, market food, local food production, life skills, and programs and community initiative. Each one of these themes are crucial as well as overlapping, and these themes are the puzzle pieces for self-determination to make food sovereignty. Currently, each one of these pieces is threatened due to colonial apparatuses that go beyond even assimilation tactics and forced removal. Some are much more hidden. The Inuit for millennia have not only survived but thrived in some of the harshest environmental conditions in the world. While it is easy to assume that the Eastern Arctic in Canada is rather barren, it is actually home to a wide variety of diverse and incredibly nutritious foods that have sustained the Inuit for thousands of years. These traditional foods are referred to as country foods and are another absolutely crucial piece of the food security puzzle. Country food sources are dwindling due to habitat destruction caused by climate change, a process that is largely due to the extraction and use of fossil fuels, which allows industrial capitalism to flourish. Store-bought or market foods in Nunavut must be shipped or flown in from the south, a process that makes these products exponentially more expensive. Basic needs such as toilet paper can be as much as $50, while the Nunavut median income is much lower than the rest of Canada. Store-bought foods are also rather unhealthy and have low nutritional content, increasing health risks. It is not enough to allow the federal government to create solutions for the Inuit, but rather the federal government needs to adhere to Inuit wants and models of solutions by providing funding where it matters most, at the local, community, grassroots level. In a state that privileges more top-down approaches, the idea of investing in community-based initiatives is rather foreign. However, it's absolutely essential. The federal government and the normative ideologies of the Canadian state run rather counter to the needs of the Inuit in terms of food security and otherwise. While it is clear that there is a discrepancy between Inuit ideals and solutions and that of the federal government, it is of the utmost importance that we as settlers view food insecurity in Nunavut as a crucial issue to be solved. Therefore, what can you, a settler, do to help? We can continue to educate ourselves on the histories of Canada that we have been blinded to and begin to pay attention to the multitude of knowledge systems and practices that are flourishing around us. As well, begin to share with others what you know and use your vote to advance those in office who deem self-determination as central to a complete Canada. By relinquishing the power that the colonial system has provided you, and by taking the necessary steps to learn from Indigenous ways of life and ways of being, we can all live in a multi-nation country where neo-colonial policies are not able to run rampant while we benefit and continue to remain ignorant.